Welcome to the Loaded Goat. I'm Aaron.
I'm Chris. And we're so welcoming. I'm feeling extra welcoming today. Should we do another welcome here?
Let's do another welcome.
Oh,
you ready to do the welcome?
Welcome.
Yeah. I'm Dan. I'm the special guest in the pistachio colored room.
Yeah, we're so hospitable. We make our guests introduce themselves on this show. Nice job, Christopher. And we're here. We're so happy to have Daniel de Visé back with us this week to break down Barney's Sidecar. As your listeners know, he is the author of Andy and Don and a number of other books, and we're excited to have him.
Happy to be here. You guys know your stuff.
Thank you. So last time we checked, you were working on a book on the Blues Brothers movie. How's that coming?
Oh, it's amazing. The Blues Brothers famously was this script that was like 300 pages long that Dan Aykroyd wrote, which is 300 pages equals 300 minutes. So it's too long for a movie. And he wrote that and put it inside a phone book cover because that's how he thinks, as like a funny, joke. So my first draft of the book was a bit long, a bit on the phone book side. So I'm making some judicious cuts now and adding some places, subtracting others, and it's at the editor. It's coming back to me. Actually, I've got a manuscript that just arrived in FedEx, so not the only copy, mind you. It lives on the computer now. But yeah, thank you. It's going well. It's going to come out sometime in the first half of next year, and it's going to be not just about the film, but also the boys, Aykroyd and Belushi, and their story and where they came from.
I was curious, and you had mentioned obviously that one of the things they did was they not resurrected, but they reached out and pulled in a lot of the blues and R&B singers who had performers who had not, their careers had kind of tapered off, and they almost injected life into their careers and brought them into the movie. I was curious. I never asked you we didn't ask you about the scene where they go to the bar and they pretend to be the good old boys and they run into the real good old boys. I didn't know if you'd interviewed anybody who participated in that scene or what you had, if that's going to cover, the book's going to cover an aspect of it.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I do is to make sure I'm not missing anything. So I went down a list of like 100 or so YouTube videos that are all Blues Brothers scenes to make sure that I've got this one, I've got that one, here's this crash, here's the Daily Platt, here's this, here's that. And that's in there. Just off the top of my head, the musicians, Donald Duck Dunn, Steve the Colonel Cropper, etc., Matt Guitar Murphy, contributed stories, anecdotes that ended up in that scene, like all the breaking glass on the chicken wire. They'd played gigs like that. So they were telling the writers, was our life, this is our life. We deal with this kind of stuff. What else? There's some funny stuff there. I mean, it's Indiana. It's supposed to be flat, but they ended up filming it in Hollywood because they ran out of time in Chicago. So the actual venue is actually on the lot at Universal. So there's hills in the background, which you don't want in flat Indiana. So Landis and the director they did the light in such a way that, everything's invisible behind on the horizon. So you can't see basically like the Hollywood hills, in the background.
Well, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to checking that out when it comes out.
Oh, I love these guys. I love the movie. I love everything about it. I hope I do a good job. I'm trying to juggle two things, just like with Andy and Don, right? Andy and Don is about the Andy Griffith Show, but it's also a dual biography. And my two beloved characters, Andy and Don. So I'm trying to do kind of the same formula here. So you get a Belushi, you get an Aykroyd, and you get the Blues Brothers.
And I mean, that was a pivotal, and that movie was such a pivotal point with, like the Andy Griffith Show's a pivotal point with both Andy and Don's career, but it's also, I think the Blues Brothers is a very pivotal point in the life trajectories, I suppose, of where Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi are headed, respectively, as well.
I think were John alive, he would probably say, and I think Aykroyd would say it's sort of maybe the high point. And also for a Saturday Night Live, movie, I don't think there's one that's better,
No.
What else is in that category?
Oh, Wayne's World, right?
Oh, okay.
Coneheads. You could argue maybe that Groundhog Day, it's not really a Saturday Night Live movie. That's the other really great movie made by a Saturday Night Live person. Yeah. That's the other brilliant film from those people, basically the best other film by them. But yeah, it's stuff made out of Saturday Night Live. There's a bunch of movies. They're pretty good. Wayne's World might be the one that kind of stands out in my mind. I'm trying to think what else. Now I can't think of any others. But
there's I can think of the really bad ones, like Night at the Roxbury is one that's...
We could all think of some bad ones, yeah.
Yeah, but no, that was Wayne's World, I think of, other than the Blues Brothers, I think of like just the ones that are just based on the straight up sketch. I think Wayne's World is probably the best of the modern SNL
it kind
movies.
I think it revived Queen's career, so that's something.
For sure. So for this episode, it's Barney's Sidecar, and you have it listed as one of your top 20 shows in the book, Andy and Don. And I mean, it is one that is, for me, it's just laugh out loud funny. I mean, for just visually, it's just laugh out loud funny. But what places that in the top 20 for you?
I don't know if this made it into my book, but I wrote for my book that it marks one of the series' deepest comic expeditions into Barney's puerile soul. That basically, this shows Barney as the 9-year-old, who has this rigid way of thinking about the world. Like, he almost runs over Aunt Bee, trying to stop her for jaywalking. He just doesn't understand that not all transgressions are necessarily equal, going 30 in a 25 zone, and he's so rigid, and he's like a child. And I jotted down as I was watching it again so Opie walks out of the sheriff's office and Barney walks in, and Andy goes, "I just got rid of Opie with his toys. Now here you come with yours." It's like Andy's other child, Yeah. That's what's so great about this. And it's just a hilarious episode.
I agree. What do you think, Christopher?
I liked it. It was super fun. Good Barney content, good speed, new set, new place in Mayberry we got to witness of the highway.
Oh, Highway 6. Highway 6, yeah.
So this episode first aired on January 27th, 1964, and it was written by Jim Fritzell and Everett Greenbaum. Woo-hoo. It was
Those
best.
Guys are so good.
They're the best, and Harvey Bullock is a very close second, if not right up there with them. Yeah,
you have a feel for it. Yes, you do. Yeah, those are the guys.
And it was inspired by Greenbaum buying a World War I Harley Davidson as a kid and getting it up and running, which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
And
that's just a strange scenario. Like, what do you think the parents were like? Let's take this kid to a World War II auction and see what he pulls out.
Well, he bought it,
or you can get a motorcycle.
He bought it for $4. That's also the crazy thing. It was just in like boxes, so he literally put the thing back together.
Wow.
And we opened with Miss Beggs running inside, saying another woman almost ran her off the road because she's speeding. But as far as details go, there's really nothing she's offering that can help solve the case.
She looks like her sister.
Yeah, with the one with the big teeth.
Would you go to a dentist in the back of a Toys R Us or whatever?
And then Barney comes in and he talks about setting up a roadblock to get this person, or as he refers to it, Checkpoint Chicky, which is a take on Checkpoint Charlie, and so he can nip the speeding in the bud. But Andy keeps having to remind him that they only have one squad car, and Andy leaves, and the wheels are just you can see the wheels going in Barney's head.
Could I say Checkpoint Chicky is, I think the writers created that, I think. And that's like a term that I think a lot of Andy Griffith Show fans recognize. And I don't think there's all that many that you say those two words and everybody who's watched that show knows what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't, we recently had Chris Hudson on, who did the documentary, The Mayberry Effect. And it was about a lot of the folks who go to Mayberry Days and the other events. And now that you mentioned it, I do think I would imagine that the guys doing the Mayberry police officers, they have to be saying Checkpoint Chicky a lot when they're talking about setting something up.
At Mayberry Days, they should set up a blockade randomly outside of town and then pull people over for going 2 miles over the speed limit.
Real police forces to this day set up Checkpoint Chickies, which in homage, and this is 70 years later, they still do it. Yeah.
Wow.
Checkpoint Chicky.
That's funny. And Andy comes in later to find Opie burning his name into some into some wood for posterity, so people will look back on him. People will look and say, when Mayberry becomes a big city, like Opie says, they'll look back and see his name and the date that it was written. And then Opie leaves, and Barney comes in with a helmet and goggles, and he takes Andy outside and shows him the motorcycle that he just bought, and it has a sidecar. And it is just, you kind of really appreciate, like, you're like, he's trying to make this efficient, but it is just kind of like the motorcycle looks ridiculous. And then Barney says he's not going to make a big deal out of this, but then he puts his helmet and goggles on. And this is something that every time I see this, I just start cracking up, because it's like Lee Marvin on his horse in Cat Ballou leaned up against the wall, and it's just laugh out loud funny. Or it's like Jake and Elwood Blues sitting in the sauna trying to get somebody to help them out, but they've still got their hat and their sunglasses on while they're in their towels. I mean, it is just stuff that just makes you makes you laugh out loud.
I also think it's one of the first like costume comedy things that I can think of where those goggles are hilarious.
I mean, they're so funny.
They're reptilian. It makes them look like a creature from the Black Lagoon or something.
Yeah, that really does. And then later he's riding the motorcycle, and that's even funny. And what I love about this is the show does not even try to remotely take this seriously, because the scene of everybody just seeing Barney, and then they just bust out, everybody in town busts out laughing too, is just hilarious. Because it's like, you never really want to see Barney, like, you feel bad when the town makes fun of Barney, but this is just too hard not to laugh at. It's just so silly.
And then Andy sort of tries ever so gently to talk him out of wearing this stuff, but without mocking him. Just like, are you sure that's what you want to do? He's trying, because he knows that he's making an ass of himself, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's just trying to counsel him, just to help his friend, save his friend from further humiliation. But Barney, of course, doesn't see it, because he's got this, he's a 9-year-old, he's got this, I'm, Colonel Fife now. And he's caught up in this sort of imagination land or something.
Yeah. And I mean, Andy goes from calling him Baron von Richthofen, who was actually the ace German pilot during World War I, and that's who Snoopy is actually emulating when he's flying on his doghouse in the Peanuts comics. Yeah. And then Andy even tries to show Barney how silly he looks by taking the actual helmet and putting it on his head. And Barney's response is to get really serious and be like, "Don't wear my hat," and that even makes it even funnier, because Barney's not even Barney doesn't care if Andy looks silly if he's got his hat on.
My hat,
yeah.
Give me my hat back, yeah.
And then Andy says, to show there's no hard feelings, he'll take him to lunch and pick up the tip. And then Barney,
you can tell that there'd been this gag before. Barney's really going on. Like, no, I'll tip.
Yeah. And then Barney says he'll do him one better, and that Andy can ride in the sidecar. And they go outside to take off, and Barney pulls away, and the folks in town have unhooked the sidecar. And everybody's laughing. Andy can't keep from laughing. Fritzell and Greenbaum said they stole this from the Marx Brothers. And which is, I mean, it's a very Marx Brothers scene. And then, Barney just loops back around. Andy suggests that people are going to keep on if he keeps this motorcycle, but Barney just won't budge.
Andy's such a trooper with this. I kind of thought he would be embarrassed, and he gets in and he knows this is ridiculous. It's a great scene.
It's great. It's great. And we cut to Barney in the bushes, and he's got a bush covering for the motorcycle. And it's just him sitting in the bushes looking through there with those goggles and that helmet. I mean, I don't think there has ever, there are so many episodes that are just laugh out loud funny, but I don't think the only thing that I think is even remotely funny, as funny image-wise, is the Guest of Honor episode where they keep trading hats with Floyd and the other townspeople. This is just if you said, I'm going to, let's make, you've got to keep a straight face. And you were like, I can't keep a straight face. You just show me that image of Barney and his goggles and his on his motorcycle, and I'm just going to lose it, I think.
I'm trying to look over the bush. It's just so funny when he's trying to stop the trucks.
This is an episode where Andy, who periodically struggled to keep a straight face, he's losing it a little bit when Barney has that speech about next thing I don't even know what he says. Like, when the guns start shooting, I don't even know the line. It's a great line. And they kept cutting away from him because he was starting to lose it because, everything about Barney was just implicitly funny to Andy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine how how hard it must have been for him to keep a straight face in a lot of these scenes.
Oh, he fails, over and over, and they have to sort of cut away from him.
Yeah. So Barney pulls a truck over for who is speeding, and the guy says he needs the extra 5 miles to get over Turner's Grade, which is a road that's actually similar to one named in Mount Airy called Turner Mountain Road. And Barney says he'll give him a warning, but he should know that the highway is now going to be under constant surveillance. I just also think about the way he pulls out with that bush in front of him. I think Andy also does him a favor by getting him to get rid of that motorcycle, because I think at some point he pulls that motorcycle out. He's going to get just mowed down by a truck at some point.
Have you all been pulled over at a ridiculous speed limit before?
I got one speeding ticket in my life, and it was for going 68. I don't know if that sounds ridiculous, but I think it was when the national speed limit was still 55. I could be wrong about that. It was a long time ago.
I've gotten pulled over in small town speed traps where if you go 5 miles over the speed limit, at the very least, they'll give you a warning the first time. But there are towns like that make a lot of revenue off of speeding tickets. But never gotten one on the highway or anything like that.
Okay. I've had plenty. But
have you? Well, I mean, I've gotten speeding tickets, but they weren't ridiculous. They were very warranted. I mean, that's the thing.
Got it.
Yeah. And Barney comes into the jail and says he's learning things on his bike, like, say he can't, if he opens his mouth driving down the road and holds his tongue to the roof of his mouth, he can't say words that start with the letter S, which just the image of Barney riding his motorcycle with his mouth open is pretty funny itself.
After I watched this, I just tried that kind of just inherently. And then my wife looks at me and is like, I saw you do that. I was like, oh.
And I actually was going to put this in my book. I don't know if it wound up in there. Andy contemplates that remark and then asks Barney gravely, "You didn't let anybody see you riding around on that thing with your mouth open." And Barney says, "Nobody saw me. Think I'm crazy or something?" But he's genuinely worried about him at this point. Like, he's riding around with his mouth wide open in a World War I motorcycle with a sidecar, wearing like a Nazi helmet and reptilian goggles. Could he possibly look more strange?
I mean, and you were talking about his hyper focus as he's given out 11 warnings at this point about, and Andy says he wishes that Barney hadn't done that because, of the people needing the extra speed to get over Turner's Grade. And at that point, I think what we saw was a precursor to the truck protests that we saw that paralyzed cities. Yeah, at night trucks are coming through town to make a point to keep the Taylor household, and they're keeping the Taylor household up. And Andy knows that they are sending a message to Barney, and we go to commercial.
I love that comparison.
I mean, it just came to me. It's they are using their power or using their voice in a very targeted way. And this episode's production and artwork are managed by Pod Machine, who does great work at a great rate. If you want to learn more about this service, go to podmachine.com. You can also get a 10% discount by entering Loaded Goat in the promo code section if you purchase one of their plans. After the break, Barney rolls through town giving out parking citations and measuring the space with a stick until someone reaches out from under the car and takes the stick from him. And
we also never know who it is, right? It's just kind of like...
I wondered if it was going to be... Yeah, I wondered if it was going to be Andy, and he pops up, but I don't... Who knows who it is?
I think it was Tex.
And then, I mean... And Aunt B carrying her groceries across the street and Barney rolling up on her and causing her to drop them is just, another gut-busting scene.
I think it's one of the best Aunt B moments that I've seen so far.
Yeah, And keep in mind, we're coming right off of Aunt B, the Crusader, which is not one of Aunt B's finest moments. So this is some good Aunt B. And then at the jail, everyone is so irritated about the motorcycle. And even Aunt B, and they go home, and Aunt B says she saw a movie where they used wire to kill Nazis on motorcycles. And Andy says they don't want to kill them, but they do want to basically, get him to stop doing this. And then they smell Opie burning an address number into the house. And Andy comes out and tells him to hold off. And Barney rides by on the motorcycle. And Andy holds this up and gets an idea. And, this is one of the few episodes I've ever watched where Andy gets an idea. And I'm really like, what's he actually going to do? Because I wasn't sure what the actual solution was going to be.
Yeah, it didn't seem obvious. Like, what's the possible connection between this thing that burns, whatever that's called, that carves into wood, and this conflict he has with this ridiculous motorcycle?
I had decided that back in the old days, the speed limit signs were all wood and not metal. And so he was going to have Opie make new speed limits that were 45, which is what I decided.
I thought maybe he was going to puncture his tires or something, or like destroy the motorcycle with this thing, which would have been kind of weird and off-putting. But I couldn't remember, because I'd watched this episode several times before, but I couldn't remember what he did. I was like, what's he exactly going to do with this thing?
Yeah. But his idea is kind of ingenious, because at the jail, Andy comes in and he's like, I have some ideas for fixing up the sidecar. It seems like he's all bought in. And then they find a wooden plaque saying that the motorcycle was used by General Pershing during World War I. And
terrible war.
I mean, nobody looks at World War I and says, "Yeah, that was time well spent." I mean, it's.
Can we do a quick detour here? Have you all seen Quiet on the Western Front, the newer German version on Netflix?
I've seen I saw the 1930s version. That was disturbing enough. I can't imagine a modern version.
Boy, Paul goes through it. Y'all got to watch it. I think it's the best movie. It should get all the Oscars. It's the most. Who knew trench warfare was so violent? I mean, but high recommendation. Wow. Fantastic movie.
Well, the film 1918, is that what it's called?
17.
1917. I was one off. Is one of the most artistically kind of compelling films I've seen in several years. I think that's one that's shot in one shot all the way from the beginning to the end, and that gives you a sense of that war was not fun.
No.
Yeah, it's always. I mean, I feel like there are World War II movies where there's the dissolution of war, but I've never seen, other than there's only one movie I've ever seen where they make World War I say, "Oh yeah, this had its purpose," and that was Sergeant York. Every other World War I movie I've ever seen has been, "What are we doing here?" It's always been the level of dissolution.
I made a note to myself. One of my theories about this show is that they think they're trying to pass it off as if it were being made in the 1930s. Mm-hmm. Like everything about the show just emanates that it's really, really old. So remember, this was being made and released in the 60s, but I think there were very few tells to let you know that it was happening in the 60s. And so this is an example where if he'd bought a World War II motorcycle, that would burst that bubble that we're in the 30s. But because it's a World War I motorcycle, it kind of allows them to carry on this sort of illusion or sort of bubble that, we're in Andy's and Don's own childhoods in the 1930s. I just noticed, it occurred to me when I was watching it again.
That's a good point. And when you think about it, I don't know, I don't know how well motorcycles maintain, but it's hard to imagine a motorcycle rolling along 45 years later too.
Yeah, it just occurred to me there's not much in that show that gives away the time of it, right? And so much of it, there's very little in terms of modern technology, and I think they want you to think that you're not quite sure what epoch you're watching in the show, which is partly why it's so timeless now.
Yeah, for sure. And
similar to this podcast,
exactly, timeless,
very timeless, very timeless. And so Barney's not happy, but he and Andy agree that it should be put on display at the National Guard Armory in honor of the World War I veterans of Mayberry.
And not at the Smith Brothers Museum.
Not at the Smith
Brothers.
The Smith Brothers
Washington.
up in Washington.
Yeah.
And Barney's sad. He hates to part with his motorcycle, and he asks Andy to deliver it. And Andy says, "Don't look back." And I mean, Barney's literally almost like going into the wall, like the guy at the end of the Blair Witch Project. I mean, he's
verklempt.
Yeah, he's very upset. Yeah. And we go to commercial. And in the epilogue, Andy is at the jail and gets a call that Barney's bought another thing from the basically the armory. And we cut to Andy pulling over a tank thinking it's Barney, but it turns out it's an actual army tank, on a mission, and we go to commercial.
I love it. And you also get a little, I don't know my ranks at all, but I feel like I got another good vibe about Andy's being in in World War II when he immediately identifies the character. I think he's like Lieutenant Colonel. He can tell.
He recognizes his ranks.
Yeah.
Me, I drove behind a Lieutenant Colonel today, and I knew it was him because on the back of the Corolla it said Lieutenant Colonel on the vanity plate.
On his vanity plate. Yeah, it's funny because I mean that's the thing is they're always a little ambiguous about Andy, they're always ambiguous about serving in the war. They allude to it in a few episodes, but they don't say too much about it. And I've always wondered if it's just something Andy'd ever wanted to, since I think it was always a sore spot with him. I mean, you covered this in your book about him not serving in World War II and it being something that was kind of a controversial topic and just something that you just knew never to discuss around him.
Yeah, his old classmates from Mount Airy, North Carolina, brought it up to me that the people who grew up with him, the boys who went to school with him, didn't like the fact he hadn't served. That was a real divisive thing back then. And so even decades later, they didn't like the fact that, the Ange hadn't served.
Yeah. So how many whistles would folks give this? I can go ahead and start. As you know, Daniel, we do the ranking from 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest. I'd give this a 10.
Why don't I go? I would give this a 10 as well. I'd do a 9, but because of the bush, we're up to a
10. For my purposes, because I'm so interested and invested in the relationship between Andy and Barney, it's one of my all-time favorites. I'd give it a 10. Andy, at one point in this episode, says to Aunt B, and this is getting at why this character of Barney is so compelling. He says, "I wish we had a psychiatrist in town. I bet Barney'd be a real study."
That's a great line. Thank you for bringing that up. I thought that was so funny.
That is a great line. And, and it's probably, and that's really one of the, that's really one of the few modern things too, that they ever really mention something, is that at that point psychiatry was, I guess, coming into the norm in this, or somewhat the norm in the 60s. I mean, one would argue that mental health treatment is still kind of taboo in certain parts, but it is one of the, but it's also like, I wish you had a psychiatrist because Barney'd be a real study, but you're also a little bit like, Barney would be I would almost have a behavioral specialist or like a criminal profiler and say, what goes on in the mind of Barney Fife?
Oh, interesting.
I think he's as good of a maladjusted, imperfect but very funny character as like Basil Fawlty, or John Cleese from Fawlty Towers. And there's a famous episode of Fawlty Towers where there's a psychiatrist at the hotel, and he says, "There's enough material here for an entire conference." And that's the sense I get from Barney. There's a lot to unpack in that mind of this 9-year-old sort of man-child guy, and I love that Andy kind of alludes to that.
Yeah, for sure. Any final thoughts?
I have one, Aaron.
Okay.
This is more direct feedback for you, and I wanted to give you the entire episode to try to. You missed a key fact about this episode that I can't believe you didn't know. So you remember, if we go back a couple of scenes where all the townspeople are really upset outside yelling at Barney when they're going into the jail. A lot of those people are common character actors that you'd see throughout the Andy Griffith Show and all these other things. But there's one person that you've never seen in Mayberry before, but you have seen in Beverly Hillbillies. It's a young man on the left, and his name is, it's a name that I know really well. It's Jerry Betchel. and he was actually the stunt man on the motorcycle and riding around, and so he was also an extra on the side when he wasn't performing. And I just can't believe that you missed that fact.
So I'm gonna here's what I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna guess that you and Randy Turner went and got ice cream the other day, and he gave you that fact.
We actually toured a beef jerky facility.
Oh, okay.
Which is fascinating. And that one came out as we were working through a turkey stick.
That's nice. Well, I'm glad he's able to help you do your homework and research for this for these episodes. So, Daniel, if folks want to find your work these days or want to
what a hard pivot.
I'm there. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to say? You brought this factoid up. You humiliated me with. Tried to humiliate me with it. It's just not. It's not nice.
So Daniel, if folks wanted to find you.
No, if folks, so the book's coming out, but if folks want to see your work or check out your work, where should they go?
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I have a website, which is danieldevisé.com, but the book is Andy and Don, and it's very, very findable. It's been out for, several years now. And it's, thank God it's rung up some sales. And I would also urge anybody who listens to this to watch Duck Soup, which is the Marx Brothers movie where the sidecar gag comes from. Cause it's a great movie. And they actually really play the sidecar gag over and over again. It's like a running gag throughout the film. It's hilarious, and it's as funny as this episode. Definitely.
That sounds great. Yeah, is that the one where he becomes the
dictator of somewhere, Fredonia or something? Yeah,
yeah.
And I think the sidecar is supposed to be his official sort of limousine. But yeah, you could. As soon as I saw this the first time when I was like in high school, I recognized the gag because my father was really into Marx Brothers, and so I'd seen Duck Soup, and I recognized it right away.
Yeah, it's a great movie. All right, well, thanks again for joining us. This has been awesome. Excuse me. Thanks for listening. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you think about it, subscribe or leave a comment. And next week we'll do My Fair Ernest T. Bass. And until then, Christopher, don't wear my hat.
Oh, it's so cute on me. Good to see you, Daniel.
And you guys too. Thank you.
Thank you.